You are listening to the Hiking Radio Network, where we talk the walk with shows by hikers, about hikers, for everybody.
Mighty Blue on the Appalachian Trail, the ultimate midlife crisis. Join Steve and his guests every week as he staggers from Georgia to Maine.
Hey guys, thanks for coming back to the podcast. This is Mighty Blue on the Appalachian Trail, the ultimate midlife crisis. And you're listening to episode number 387. We're getting close to that 400th episode, and I'm still looking for ideas for that show. Write to me at steve@hikingradionetwork.com if you've got an idea for something I can do to celebrate that milestone. Today, our guest is one of those people whose love for the trail extends to giving so much to the trail. She's Kathie Brennan, suggested to me by Don Schulter, a listener. Kathie is the president of Ozark Trail Association in Missouri, and she really gives us a masterclass today on trail maintenance and the kind of feeling that she gets with the work she does. By the time you've listened to her, you'll want to sign up to clear a bit of trail yourself. Kathie will be on in a moment. Then, with our Mighty Blue class of 23 dwindling, with several of our team members nearing the end, we hear from the ultra-energetic Joanne Flagg, who has returned from a side trip, or a blue blaze, to Iceland for a group hike. She's back in the US and raring to go again on the AT. Also today, Jessica Lang-Wright has flipped north and is into the whites. Joanne and Jessica will be on after Kathie. And talking of getting near the end of the trail, George Stefanos has less than 300 miles to go, and he's done with slack packing. We'll hear George's story at the end. So let's go. Here's Kathie Brennan. Today we got one of the many unsung heroes, or in this case heroines, of hiking. This is Kathie Brennan. Hey Kathie, thanks for coming on the podcast.
Thanks for having me.
Now, the reason you're here, of course, is that you're very involved in trail maintenance. But before we hear about how you got into the maintenance, let's hear how you got involved in hiking in the first place.
Early on, I had been a road runner with a friend, and I couldn't run anymore. And so being able to get out in the woods away from work, family, offered you the opportunity just to enjoy things. And it was a time that my parents didn't take us as kids out into the woods. So with young children and getting involved with kids and other families, we started going camping, and it offered us the opportunities just to get out in the woods. So from there, it just kept going and growing and growing. So I started reaching out, going to other areas in Missouri and then beyond Missouri borders.
Right. And you've, of course, been made very aware of the dangers of ticks, haven't you? Tell us about alpha gal's disease, which I'd never heard of, by the way.
Oh, yeah. So I was looking back at some memories on Facebook. And so it's been 10 years ago that I ended up being diagnosed with ehrlichiosis. And I had been out on the Appalachian Trail as a volunteer and went out with a friend, came home, and immediately went into the hospital ER and ended up in ICU for 5 days. And not good. It was, my lungs filled up with fluid. It was diagnosed as ehrlichiosis, but it's a bacterial infection. Uh-huh. So I just thought I didn't feel good. And so from that, ended up recovering over the years. But then just last May, I was diagnosed with alpha-gal, which is another tick-borne illness that when you're bit by a white dotted tick, it creates a sugar protein. And not everybody has it, but it's more common now than what a lot of people realize. And so I'm allergic to mammal meats and mammal byproducts. So it's like instantaneously I've turned into a vegetarian.
Nightmare for barbecues.
Oh, yeah. Well, I can eat poultry and fish, but I have to watch for cross-contamination and also like byproducts that you don't think about.
You talked about a white dot on its back. Are these prevalent in your area, or I mean, because you're in Mississippi, aren't you? So what's the area that the white dotted tick is, or are they all over the place?
Well, the range of it is, they call them white dotted dog ticks is what we call them too. But I'm thinking that they're pretty prevalent, even with the information off the Appalachian Trail on the east coast and then going into the Midwest. And I think the drier the climates, you're not going to see them as much, but as long as we have the woods and the
Sure.
water, and that, you're going to see more of it. And the vegetation is a huge as thing as well.
And this obviously hasn't put you off going out into the woods,
no.
though.
No.
So, but
No.
Can you be careful? Is there something you do, or are tick checks a regular part of your life anyway?
Yeah, check, but really taking the precautions. Promethium is a great product that you put it on your clothes. It's good for 2 or 3 washings. I've literally watched ticks get on my pants and then look down again, and they're dead. So they're still hanging on, but they're not there.
Wow.
They're not living. And so it's just taking those precautions. Even backpacks, people don't think about spraying their backpacks. And what do you do when you stop to rest? Take your backpack off, and then you put it down on the ground. So boots and socks, and pretty well, it's like that precaution. And you can get picaridin. DEET, DEET I don't like as well. It breaks down a lot of your clothing, like your socks, the elastic. Yeah. So, but yeah, and people are like, well, I don't like using some things. And it's like, well, do you want to deal with the tick disease, or do you want to deal with what could possibly be the side effects of it? And I don't have any side effects from using the product. So,
but is it debilitating? Is what you've got, is it quite debilitating, or is it just a thing that comes on every now and then?
It can be debilitating. If I have cross-contamination and don't realize that I've eaten something, it can put me under for a good 24 hours. It affects other people. It can be as severe as having anaphylactic shock. Which I have to carry an EpiPen with me. Haven't had to use it, but there's times when the symptoms, I can feel them. My throat kind of thing. And then even with your stomach, it's like having bad Chinese, I guess. So, but yeah, but other than that, it's like and you will have other effects. I mean, it's a whole list of different things that can affect people. But for the most part, I've managed to keep active, keep busy, get out in the woods and do what I love to do.
I've got to tell you, having a disease called alpha-Gal's disease, it's a pretty good name for it, isn't it? Let's face it.
Yeah.
As things go. And you're currently the president of the Ozark Trail Association in Missouri. Now, that's quite a step from just going out into the woods because you didn't want to run anymore to becoming a president of that organization. How did that come about, and why did you get involved in that?
Well, I was working at our school district as a secretary, and one of the fellow secretaries that I worked with, her husband had gotten involved with the Ozark Trail Association. This is about 2006, 2007. And Liz said, oh, you'd love to go do this. Mark's working on this trail. And I'd never heard of the trail before. So decided to sign up, showed up, and it was me and 10 other guys. And the gentleman that was in charge of the event that day was very accommodating. It was like, never done this before. And he goes, don't worry about it. We'll teach you how to do it. And so took you out into the woods. There's no trail there. And would come by and say, you're doing a good job, but let me suggest this and this and that. And so by the end of the day, when we got done, you walked out on new trail that had not been there. And so that was the great thing about it, was that I was part of a bigger scheme of things. And then when we walked out of the woods, put the tools up, and then the big thing of the founder of the organization, John Roth, was that you did meals at the end of a day thing. And so Matt pulled out this wobbly, janky barbecue grill, fixed brats and burgers, had chips and salad, and just sat around and just talked and got to know each other. And several years later, as I got more involved, we received a grant from REI, and their stewardship coordinator from out in Portland came to visit one of our big trail events. And we didn't see him until the end of the day when we were walking out, and she was standing around talking, and she goes, well, Kathie, why, what made you come back and made you want to do this? And I said, well, it's that guy over there. Matt was my first crew leader. And then I had another gentleman behind me, and he goes, well, Kathie, you're the reason I came back, because you were my first crew leader. And so, it was how opening and inclusive everybody was when we came in. And so it took me a couple of years to get more involved because I wasn't sure of the organization. It was very small, but they had a whole plethora of things that needed to be done on this trail. And
was this a growing trail though? At the time you joined them, was it still growing? And
yes.
Because that one thing that several things you said when we spoke really stuck with me was you said that there was no trail there in the morning, which is quite something when you walk out. Is that what it does for you? You actually make something happen out of just somebody's imagination.
Yes. Well, and it's a vision. I mean, it's still a vision of the trail, to connect to the Missouri-Arkansas border, and make its way all the way to the Mississippi River. So that's the thing, is building new trail is that connection along with volunteers. It's like, they may never ever come back again, but it's talking to them and saying, do you realize that, this 100 feet of trail that you built today is part of a bigger trail system, 100 feet out of 430 now, and to continue to grow. So a lot of people, it's like it just has to click with them. And, but that's the thing, is when you're walking out at the end of the day, seeing what you did and what everybody did collectively on building a half-mile trail or a mile of trail, it just, as John says, it kind of raises the hair up on the back of your neck, because it's what you've done collectively, and it's going to be there for generations. That's the thing. It's like, how do you look beyond the bigger picture of what's out there? Well,
you said earlier on that when you first started, it was you and 9 other guys. I presume you meant guys.
Yep.
Is it a male-dominated thing still, or are there more and more women getting out there?
Oh, I would say it's 50-50.
Oh, right.
Yep. One of my best trail adopters, volunteers, crew leader, Leatrice, is from Topeka, Kansas, drives all the way over, and she is 72. And she has her own adopted trail section where down by West Plains, Missouri, she comes out, she hits that section left and right. She leaf blow, saw, she got certified as a sawyer. And then I have the same thing with the guys. It's like, I have these gentlemen that come out, they're semi-retired or retired. I have grandmothers, I have young individuals, school teachers, psychiatrists. I run the gauntlet. Veterinarians, school, like I said, school teachers, truck drivers.
I can tell you're so enthusiastic. I could tell from when we spoke before, you're so enthusiastic. It needs somebody of that nature to imbue that enthusiasm with other people, doesn't it? So you need leaders who are prepared to lead and not push people into doing something, but get people to see what you see. Because one of the things, actually, it's not one of my questions, but I'm going to mention it because it made me smile when I was going over it this morning. You said you mentioned leaf blowing a trail. And you said it's absolutely instant gratification. So this wasn't meant to be a question, but talk about that, the instant gratification of leaf blowing a trail.
So we do maintenance. Our maintenance season is about September through the 1st of June. And so in Missouri, we have oak, hardwood forest, pines, that kind of thing. And the trail travels through a national forest, 364 miles of it. So it's rugged, it's remote. And because it's remote, sometimes it doesn't get that usage where the trees work their way off. So
sure.
We go in and we'll have a maintenance event, and I'll start assigning people where to go, and I'll ask somebody who wants to leaf blow. And some of them are kind of like, well, okay. And it's a backpack blower. And when I give it to him, and we get ready and we get out on the trail, and I look at him and I go, I'm just going to let you know, this is instant gratification. It's like instant gratification. And they kind of look at me quizzically. And then at the end of the day, when they get done and I find him and I go, so how was it? And they'll go, oh my gosh, that was so great. It's like, I will leaf blow for you anytime I can. And it's something about blowing the leaf litter off and uncovering sections of trail that are covered in this beautiful limey green moss. And there's sections of it that it's just like a carpeted pathway through the woods. So yeah, it's one of those things that, and when you walk on it, that's what's also funny is when we meet up with individuals that have walked on parts of that. They're just like, did you guys leaf blow the trail? And we're like, yeah. And they go, we have never heard of that before. So
that's funny.
yeah, but yeah, I mean, if I put out there, it's like, I need 5 people to leaf blow. I have 5 hands immediately up in the air going, I want to do it. I want to do it.
That is fascinating. I got to tell you, it feels nothing like that when I leaf blow outside my yard.
No.
Yeah. And these days you hike less, but you still maintain. Talk us through a typical session. Is it over a week or weekend? What would a typical session be for you?
So for a 1-day event, we would put it up on our website under events. Tell people what we're going to do, when it's going to start, where we're going to meet, and then for me, as somebody that's in charge of an event, I live 2 hours away from our office, so I have to maybe go the day before, pick up all the equipment with our trail truck, and then meet everybody at a certain designation. And then from there, depending on how many people show up, then we can split up into different sections of the trail. So we may only do 2.5, 3 miles in each section. And then there could be like 3 or 4 or 5 in each section. So they're not only leaf blowing, but we're lopping, we're cutting trees that have fallen over the trail. And so it's a collaboration of everybody when we get there. And so it's kind of like, okay, we're starting at 8:30. We get out on the trail by 9, and then we have a designated, everybody meet back at 3:30. Now, if they don't show up, my heart skips a beat, and I'm like, okay, where are they at? Yeah. So, and then when we get done, by then
maybe they're having so much fun leaf blowing. You never know.
Yeah. Well, I've had that too, where I have people that take off, and it's like, okay, I have the gas. They're going to run out one of these times, and they'll come walking back to get it. So, but then we plan a meal, and so the meal, and if we're someplace that there's camping available, we come in on Friday, we camp out on Friday night, have the meal on Saturday, sit around Saturday night around a campfire, and then everybody will leave on Sunday morning. Or we have people that are like, can we work again tomorrow? And it's like, yeah, sure, half a day, let's do it.
You sound like you enjoy this more than you actually enjoy hiking. Is that fair to say?
Well, yeah, I would say that, because I've done it for so long. And the thing is like when you're hiking, you have this outlook on trails. When you build new trail, and you've been a hiker, when you build new trail, you go in and do tread restoration, or if you do maintenance, when you're back out hiking again or backpacking, all of a sudden you're going, oh, I wish I had a pair of loppers. Oh my gosh, look at that. It's like, look at that back slope. It's like all of a sudden you become a connoisseur of what trail you're hiking on. And so that's the thing is like, if I backpack, and I'm getting ready to leave Wednesday for the Appalachian Trail to volunteer, but I plan on hiking some areas, and I know I'm going to be that kind of person that's going, where's my loppers? Where's my loppers? I need to lop while I do this. And so that's the thing is when people ask me, do I hike the Ozark Trail? And I tell them, no, I maintain the trail. And it's also, the big thing now is the fastest known time. Somebody wants to do a length of, So it's kind of like they're not seeing what's out there.
Not. Yeah. You know what? To be fair to them, that isn't what they're looking for.
They want that. Yeah.
And that's all they want, the 5 cents at a time. And God bless them for doing that, but that wouldn't be for the vast majority of people out there.
No.
But I was wondering whether, because you do so much maintaining, and once again, another thing I wrote down that you actually said, I'm walking along and I think, oh, this needs weeding.
Yep. Oh, I do.
Does that kind of take away some of the joy of hiking itself?
Oh, because there's times like even when I'm lopping, if I'm going along lopping or if I'm carrying my saw pack where I'm sawing, I have the ability to enjoy what's around the trail and what's in the woods. And I have found so many different things. One thing that I love finding out in the middle of nowhere are survey markers. that the U.S. Geological Survey markers and finding the posts that say this is a witness tree or this is a witness post. And it's there's nothing around. And then the other thing is like, finding unusual trees.
Sorry, explain that. The vacant look on my face wasn't accidental. I have no idea what you're talking about.
So the land
witness
survey
tree.
markers?
No, the witness tree.
A witness tree is like when they do a survey mark, they take and put metal signs on a tree to designate the four corners around that survey mark. Oh. So it's a U.S. Geological metal marker that's either put in what's usually put in concrete, but then they mark trees around it to show that those are witness trees. But eventually those trees are going to fall over. But to find those out in the middle of the woods is interesting because there's some places that there's no roads. I mean, there's a good 2-3 miles into the forest down the trail where off to the right, all of a sudden you see one. And they're survey markers for the property and the land from years ago or when they were buying the land.
You must be so observant because when I'm walking, all I'm doing is looking at my feet to start falling over.
Well, yeah, kind of that. But I mean, I see snakes, I see turtles. I mean, that's the thing. It's like, I love the wildflowers that are out along the trails. And we also, and a lot of times I post those on my Facebook posts and people are like, thanks for sharing them because they don't see them normally and that kind of thing. So, but house ruins, I mean, we have found old chimneys in the forest. So
I've seen a few times on the ATA as well.
Yep.
But tell us a bit about the Ozark Trail. You said yourself you hadn't actually heard of it and you lived around there. So, how long it is, what its plans are for the future. Because if you're now the president, you can of the association, in many ways you help push that forward, don't you? What it's going to do in the future. So tell us about it.
So the trail, little prehistory on it was there was a scoping project for the nation for all the land managers, federal and state, to look at recreational opportunities back in the early 70s. And that was to look at how many trails, recreational trails were available for hiking, mostly for hiking. And so in 1977, the federal and state land managers that were in the state of Missouri came together and they formed the Ozark Trail Council. So Mark Twain National Forest, Corps of Engineers, National Park Service, state parks, and Department of Conservation. And then with those, what they ended up doing was creating that council. And then their vision was to have the trail go from the Mississippi River along the Merrimack River. And at that time, there was a Merrimack Dam project that was in the works. So they would have dammed Merrimack River at a place called Castlewood, and it would have flooded the whole Merrimack River all the way down to where our start of our trailhead is on the Merrimack River. And the Merrimack River flows east into St. Louis. So during those years, the agencies were developing and building and continuing to plan trails and looking how they could combine the state and federal lands trails that they had and make them more. Well, then it was all going good until about the late 80s, early 90s. And then budgets were getting cut. People were leaving and positions were getting cut too. So they ended up back in the late 90s and early 2000. John Roth was a gentleman that was young in his early mid 40s, and he had a computer company called McKenzie and Roth. Well, there was no McKenzie. He just thought it was more appropriate to have two names, more prestigious. So, and he sold his company, made some money, and retired. And so his thing was to go out in the woods, enjoy what Missouri had in the Missouri Ozarks. And he came across one of the sections called Trace Creek and found that it was overgrown, undersigned, just dilapidated condition as a trail, not really you could find it. And so he went to the Potosi Mark Twain National Forest Ranger office and talked to Nazarenko, who was the ranger, and they had a conversation, and he said, well, if you want to come out and volunteer, come on out. So that was kind of like the start of it. And that's how John got involved with the forest, and also looking at what the vision had been of getting the Ozark Trail to be this long distance trail. So John worked on it, and in 2002, the company, 2002, the Ozark Trail was incorporated as a 501(c)(3), and John and another gentleman, John Dodorian, they had decided that they wanted to create a all volunteer organization that would take care of the Ozark Trail. And with that, there was also the question of, do we want it? And since the organization doesn't own the trail, it's public and it's on public land. They were trying to help. Do we help them make it foot only? Do we make it multi-use with mountain biking and equestrian use, which some of it had already been designated? And that's the thing about land managers. They designate who the users are for trail. So moving ahead, John started the organization, and then from there.
So, sorry, you skipped over that bit, because I was going to come back to the designation, the designation use anyway. So I might as well ask that question now. Then. Was he for making it multi-use then?
He was.
Because that's important, isn't it? From what
yes.
when we were speaking the other day, and I'd like you to lead into that, what we were talking about.
So
multi-use. The
more users you have, the more you are apt to get funding, and so that's a huge thing, because since it's a public trail and the land managers are to manage it, they don't have a lot of money to put into the trail. So that's where the organization, the OTA, came into fruition in taking up the slack of not being able to maintain the trail and to develop it. So the mission of the trail is also the organization is to develop, promote, protect, and maintain the natural rugged beauty of the Ozark Trail. So the agencies now rely on the Ozark Trail Association to do that maintenance and to do that care of the trail so that it gets the maintenance that it needs that they can't provide. And over the course of time, that 125-mile section of the North Fork that John pushed to get built linked the top part and the bottom part, creating 230-mile through hike, which now the trail is considered one of the top 10 longest backcountry trails in the nation.
Nice. But so I was more interested. I'm also and I've thought about this morning.
Yep.
How important it is that it's multi-use, because you said that with young mountain bikers, they may very well be the future maintainers of the trail.
Yes.
And so does that suggest that really that it may well be that most new trails will be better at being multi-use for that very purpose?
Well, we're seeing a lot of mountain biking trails now because there's a huge push on mountain biking with our youth in the country and getting these kids out on the trail. And with those leagues that they're doing in every state, they have to provide community service.
Sure.
So we're getting them into an activity they're getting to love. They're understanding that these trails don't take care of themselves. And that's the word that everybody puts out now, is when trails are built, it's not going to be the city that put them in, or it's not going to be the land manager that built them, that didn't build them, but they allowed other volunteers to build them. It's going to be the volunteers that are going to be maintaining those trails.
Sure.
And so when we talk about multi-use, again, it depends on the land manager. So we have our Missouri Department of Conservation. We have 12 miles that goes through a wildlife preserve, and it's foot only. So, because they also do elk restoration. And so there's no mountain biking, but the mountain bikers, we've worked with them, and they've developed a gravel ride that can go around on the gravel roads around and then get back on the trail where it is mountain biking.
Nice.
So that's the thing. And then when it comes to funding, the more users you have, the more apt you are to get a higher ranking to receive that funding.
It's all
And
about
so
funding,
that's
isn't it?
important.
End of the day, it's kind of all about the funding. You need to get the money
Mm-hmm.
to get it done. And when we spoke before, you talked about problems that you see with trail organisations and how they develop. Please, can you talk to that for a minute?
So, so when we're having these new trails built and organizations just like us with the Mark Twain National Forest, and even now with the Corps of Engineers that we're building the trail going to Arkansas, we work with these land managers. And so what we promise them for the work that we do, we do gift in kind. And so it's our volunteer hours and it's our equipment. Now, to pay for that equipment and for the gas and the fuel and the tools, we have to rely on grants and that kind of thing. So donations, membership. So it's one of those things that you can get into. You have to watch your pennies. And so there's some organizations like the mountain biking is like 10 years ago, we didn't have all the trail running clubs or the mountain biking groups or the even some of the races that go on now. We didn't see those on the forest trails. And so with these comes more need for these organizations, not for profits and other organizations, asking businesses, writing grants and that. So the pieces of the pie are becoming smaller and it's harder to get grants.
Sure.
And so, but for us as an organization, with our land managers that we have, the Mark Twain National Forest is our only funder. And previously, for the last 18 years, it had been anywhere from $6,000 to $15,000 a year, which was considered a cost share that they gave us to take care of 364 miles within the Mark Twain National Forest.
Wow.
That doesn't even cover insurance.
I'm sure.
So that's where the fundraising comes from. But thanks to our politicians in Washington, D.C., 3 years ago, they passed a Great American Outdoor Act that was to help fund any deferred maintenance that has been occurring in our federal lands and our state lands, recreational facilities. So some picnic areas that have been closed or camping areas that have been closed because they didn't have the money and they considered the deferred maintenance are now receiving funds to upgrade that. Like we're getting new picnic tables, or we're getting fire rings, or we're getting campsites that are getting upgrades, new portable toilets, or like the
privies.
Big nice
privies.
privies, that had not been there before. So for our organization, we did a study 5 years ago, and the average norm per mile for a trail organization with as many miles that we take care of, the average mean that you should get in revenue for a trail mile is like $2,300.
Wow.
We were at like $364. And so this was across the country that we did this study on. And so we have been maintaining the Ozark Trail for pennies over the course of time. And we've done a very good job of it from the grants we've written and everything else. So the luck of the draw occurred right after that congressional vote to do the Great American Outdoor Funding. We were asked from our Mark Twain National Forest, if we could get you an extra $50,000, could you handle it? And we were like, give us 2 days. Give us 2 days and we'll get back to you. So in 2 days, we came back with a plan of how we could spend that, and also the plan of if we got $13,000. So that would be anything for paying for gas, fuel, equipment, tires for our truck, some salary for the only paid person we have, different things like that. And so waited 3 months, didn't hear anything. And all of a sudden I had called my construction and maintenance person. And I said, have you heard from Chris? And he goes, yep. He said, I'm just trying to wrap my head around it. And I said, well, what do you mean? He goes, well, you know how they asked if we could do 50,000? I said, yeah. And he goes, it's 150,000. They are making the Ozark Trail a line item in their budget for the Mark Twain National Forest, and they want us to spend the money. So it was like, oh, so so we had to come up a way, but it was great because that was the boost for us to get in and do tread restoration and maintenance on sections of trail that were decades old, that had only seen lopping and sawing and that. And now we had the opportunity to go in and make trail walkable on.
Well, I want to talk to that because I don't understand. I didn't. A note I've made, which may be wrong, but you told me before that old trails weren't built sustainably. What did you mean by that? And so, how do you build them now? In other words,
okay. So, to build them sustainably, back in the day when they were first building trail, they didn't really follow the contour of the land. They kind of went uphill, downhill, and everybody hates walking downhill and they hate walking uphill. And then they kind of went into where they said, oh, well, let's try a switchback. And switchbacks aren't great either, because if they're not designed properly, then they become a really hard uphill and downhill. So, and plus two, where the trail was built, it's a water flow, and it's all about the flow of water. When you look at how water comes down the hillside, hits the back slope of the trail, and then flows across the tread and keeps continuing down, some of that trail, because the water comes off the hillside, hits the back slope of the trail, but because the outside of the trail kind of gets what's called a berm, and it doesn't let the water flow off, so it goes down the trail. So you end up with this, if you've hiked these areas that have like a 6-inch or 8-inch trough in the middle of the trail.
Oh, yeah.
Well, that's because it wasn't built sustainably. And so what we're doing now is we're going back and reestablishing the back slope, making sure there's that 3 to 5% grade of tread, and making sure that outside edge of the trail doesn't have a berm on it, so the water continues to flow. You want it so that it's not obstructed, and then it continues to go down, and not to go down the trail and create that troughing effect where everybody hates that. Mountain bikers hate it, hikers hate it, horses hate it. And so plus two now, if we can realign the trail just a bit, instead of going straight down where it was a drain area that had originally been trail, and now it's full of rocks and the users are going off to the side creating social trails. If we can do a side alignment on a contour and just make it so that they're not going down and up, but just to go along the contour, and then it connects a little bit further down with the trail. So it makes it more sustainable instead of creating these social trails.
Well, that leads to the question, one of my last questions actually is, are trail maintenance techniques evolving with more knowledge of land management? And if so, if it is, are you seeing things these days you may not have seen 10 years ago?
Little bit. We ended up creating a trail building manual and maintenance manual for the Ozarks. And the reason that came about is because Cody, Colorado Outdoor Institute of Volunteers, came and did a training session to how to build trail. And they're from an arid area. And so when you're out in the mountains and they do trail maintenance, you can see almost like a scouring where they've pulled the dirt off the trail and down the side of it.
Right.
So instead of doing that, they want you to put that duff that you dig out, put in a 5-gallon bucket, and then you spread it. Well, you don't really need to do that in Missouri. And so John's thing was, we're not doing that. And because we can build trail in the spring, and you can come back in the fall or even that next spring, and it doesn't look like new trail because it's grown back in the vegetation in that. So with trail maintenance, we're getting away from water bars, water diversion devices, WDDs, water diversion devices.
All over the Appalachian Trail.
Yeah, all over. So the thing is, about 6 years ago, there was a study of 3 graduate students that was funded by the Appalachian Trail Conservancy for their master's program to study WDDs on the Appalachian Trail. And they found out that they don't work. You have to do what's called dips or swills, which are nicks, where instead of putting that that water bar in there, you're creating a way off to the side that the water will flow off, and not put that water bar in, because they all take maintenance. If you don't maintain a water bar, it fills up with silt and leaves.
I'm sure.
Then what happens is, you've probably you've probably walked up to one and said, okay, this is as high as my knee. How did it get this way? Well, the water came down the trail, came over the water bar, and it scoured out the dirt. And so you're left with this high step and a device in the trail that is not doing what it's supposed to. So, maintenance practices have changed. We're seeing, but still the old hand method, I have to laugh sometimes. We go back to the leaf blower.
Yes.
We use weed whips. Weed eaters are huge. We now have a walk behind weed eater machine that is wonderful for those long stretches.
Cool.
But still, there's areas that we have to walk. We have to do by hand. But it's going to be ongoing. Tools. Oh, trail tools have evolved. Oh my gosh. Where you have these hybrid trail tools that it's a McLeod and a Pulaski and a Pickmatic all together in one tool now. And you
I don't know any of them are, by the way.
Yeah. So those are three major tools.
You're nerding out here, Kathie, by the
way. Yeah. So, it's one of those things, but I mean, you learn that stuff. And the thing is, it's ongoing. It's ongoing. Trail maintenance is so ongoing.
I'm sure. And how do people learn that? So if someone's listening and thinks, oh, you know what, she's so enthusiastic, which you are, which is so lovely to hear someone enthusiastic about what they do. If someone's listening saying, I'd really like to get involved in that, would somebody teach them? Do you go to a local club? What would you recommend for people to do?
So, mostly yours is with the Appalachian Trail. And so the Appalachian Trail has trail clubs that they take care of certain miles of the trail. Those are great. A lot of them are decades old. They were begun as hiking clubs, but they maintain the Appalachian Trail. But any state has trail organizations. For me, ours is a big trail, 430 miles. So we bring in a plethora of volunteers from all over the country when they're in town. We have a lady from Germany in that, but even local ones like we have a mountain bike group that they take care of 2 trails. And it's always great to have people come out and find out about just those local trails. And it's like if they have, like in St. Louis, we have Shaw's Gardens, which is out in the country, and they always have a need for volunteers. Department of Conservation, state parks. If somebody wants to give back to even their local in their city, if you're in an urban area, there are green spaces within your city that always need help. And if somebody's like, well, how do I get it started? How do I get involved? It's like, well, if there's not something, then do it yourself. Get a group of friends to come out. It's amazing how the ball gets rolling. And there's also, and people are like, well, how do I find money to pay for tools or whatever? Lowe's is great, is a great company that supports those efforts as well.
Really?
Yeah.
That's good to know.
In towns and that. So there's always a need for volunteers. And the one thing about volunteers is people volunteer because they want to. And that's the one thing is like, I was told by a supervisor with the state parks one time, he goes, oh, Kathie, I just want to thank you for all you do. And I told him, I said, stop, do not thank me, because I would not be doing this if I didn't want to. I said, you wouldn't see me. So the reason I'm here is because I want to do this. I want to make a difference. And I just love, for me, it's the self-satisfaction of being out on the trail, walking away, throwing my saw pack back on my back and turning around, look at the tree that I just cut. Or turning around after stopping for a moment to let my arms rest from lopping a mile or trail and that. But it's what everybody finds in what they do. And sometimes that kind of work is not for people, but I had to love this one woman one time that came out to build trail with us. And I said, so how's it going? And she goes, oh, it's great. She goes, this is really neat. And I said, well, it's like, it's not easy work. And she goes, yeah, I realize that. And then she goes, but I just want to let you know, she goes, I may not come back. And I was like, oh no. But she went on to explain, she goes, I wanted to do this. I wanted to see what it was to get out and do something like this. And that was an event that we were building new trail. And I just told her, I said, you know what, you have to realize what impact you made today is going to carry on for a long time, because again, she was part of the bigger picture of this trail.
Sure.
And that's what we try and press upon people. Anytime you give back to anything, you got to look at it, not doing it for selfish reasons, but for unselfish reasons, that you're wanting to see what's going to be there for the future, for these next generations.
Yeah, I've never met anybody so passionate about something that you would think would be just damn hard work, but you're a great advocate for it. And and I encourage people. It's a pathetic excuse of mine to say that I can't do anything locally, because I'm relatively close to the Florida Trail, so I probably could. But if you want to get involved, reach out to your local clubs and just try to get involved. I did talk to Kathie some time ago when we first spoke about possibly putting together a Mighty Blue crew, but we weren't too sure how that would work out. But look, I appreciate you coming on and telling us about it, and you really are the unsung hero. So it'd be lovely for me to give you the opportunity at least to tell people what it's like for you, and you could not be more enthusiastic. So thanks very much indeed.
Oh, thank you.
Okay then, speak to you soon. Bye.
All right.
She is so collegiate and so welcoming. And who knew that leaf blowing could lead to instant gratification? Certainly not me. But for Kathie, she seems to find the positive in everything. As she says, blowing leaves uncovers the trail. How nice to have that sense of wonder as you're doing good in your community. We often take our trails, and hence these people, for granted, but they're the ones who keep our extraordinary trail system thriving. Thanks, Kathie, for all that you do. Now, Joanne Flagg is home from Iceland, and she's heading out again, of course. I caught up with her yesterday afternoon and had no idea where she actually was. Here's Joanne.
Hey, Steve.
Hey, Joanne, how are you?
I am good. How are you?
I'm good. And where are you?
I am outside of Union Station on my way to Harpers Ferry.
Dear me, this adventure is going on and on, isn't it? This is unbelievable.
Yeah.
So tell us,
yes.
So tell us about Iceland. When did you get back?
I got back. Today's Wednesday. Monday night.
Right. Wow. You look like you're having a great time. I saw a couple of pictures on Facebook. How was it?
It was fantastic. It's a whole different world over there. The flight's not that long. It's just over 5 hours, so it's not really that far away. And
wow, not bad at all.
Everybody speaks English over there, so that's easy.
They're very international over there, aren't they?
Yes, they are.
They're very sophisticated people.
Yeah. It was really fun. We started with 3 nights in Reykjavik and explored Reykjavik.
Yeah, everybody says that's great. I've never been there, but I've met a bunch of Icelanders, and I find them charming. They're curious and they're adventurous in the world as well. So I'm sure that city must be terrific.
Yeah. We did the shops and the stores and the waterfront. We saw puffins. We went out on a puffin boat and saw puffins and learned about them.
Yeah, lovely.
And
lovely.
The church, I can't pronounce the name of it. My son says their names are like you throw the alphabet up in the air and it comes down, however.
That's right. Yeah. Isn't it right? Everybody's name ends with Dottir if they're a female and son if they're a male. Is that right? You're someone's daughter or you're someone's son. Yeah. So tell us about the hiking. What about the hiking out there?
The hiking was terrific. We had to take a 4-hour bus ride to get to the trailhead. 2 hours of which was on a washboardy road. Pretty long ride, but we got there and had lunch, and I was able to go in the hot spring before we started. And Beautiful. We had a group of 14 people with an Icelandic guide. So they took
hang on, that's interesting. So you went on. I knew you were going on a group hike. How different was that for you, having had done this very individual thing for several months? What was it like to go on a group hike?
Well, I got my head ready for it before I went. So, I was a little worried that it would be slow, because that not everybody that signs up for these is a hiker.
Sure.
But it wasn't. It was, we moved right along, and I like to look at everything and take pictures. So I'd stop to look or take a picture, and I'd look up and people would be gone. Like nobody in sight. But the trail itself was elevation-wise, and that's similar to what I had been doing on the AT. There was some steep ups and some steep downs, but a lot of it was like a loose volcanic gravel.
Right.
So that was kind of interesting. And we had to go over some snow bridges where Siggy said to stay right on the path so you didn't break through the ice, because
gosh.
they've done that. We walked right by boiling pots of water or holes in the rock, and the water would be boiling in there.
Wow.
We didn't go on glaciers, but we did walk on snow. And the scenery is just, you saw the pictures. It's like a whole other world. And
yes,
on the second day, we came up over this knoll and just opened up into this valley. Like, there's a movie, I think it's Land Before Time, with little dinosaurs in it. And it's like you expect to see the little dinosaurs out there. But it was just incredible. It made me emotional to see it. It's just beautiful, and I hadn't been there before. Yeah.
And did you, apart from the people you went with the group, you actually went with people you knew, didn't you?
Yes, there was five women.
Right.
All together.
So what did your other group members think of you breaking up an Appalachian Trail hike, or did they not think anything of it at all?
Well, everybody at home is really excited about my hike, so they were glad to have me along, and they were overly impressed with thinking that I might have hiking skills or strength more than anybody else. But the group we had a really good group, both from home and of the 14 people. And we moved right along. And everybody, some people had sore feet and somebody tweaked a knee, but still everybody kept going, and it was pretty smooth. And it's fun to watch the dynamics, and Siggy talked about that too, getting to know people on the first night. And then by the third night, it's like a frat party.
Yeah.
Everybody's it's kind of a ruckus, but it's really...
I went on a group hike last year, and it was amazing how quickly we gelled as a team as well. We bonded as a team, and we actually hiked as a team. And I think it's a dynamic I never thought I'd enjoy, but I really, really enjoyed it. But now, of course, you've got the reality of getting back to the AT. Did you hesitate at all, or have you been thinking about it while you've been away, and perhaps changing some tactics, or what are you going to be doing?
No changes. I just started thinking about it a couple of days before I came home, and I have the same plan. I'm heading south from Harpers Ferry. People are like, you're gonna have some new friends to hike with, but I'm ready for some solo hiking time.
Yes, I bet you are.
After I did the 100-mile wilderness, and that was really sweet. And then I just had this almost a 2-week trip with a group and a bigger group, and that all went really well. So now I can go back and have some quiet time again. So that kind of ebb and flow works well for me, because I enjoy both.
But you had a lovely mix, haven't you, this summer?
Yeah.
Really?
Yeah.
Oh,
yeah.
Yes. So you're going to Harpers. When do you actually set out on the trail again?
Tomorrow morning.
Oh, well, you're not hanging about, are you?
Or afternoon. I think I need to traipse around Harpers Ferry a little bit, look around.
Have you signed in? Did you sign at the Visitors Centre, or are you going to do that? I suppose now you're halfway, you can sign in and get your picture, can't you?
I don't know what they do at the halfway point. I got my hang tag when I started there in April.
Right. Yeah.
So
I
I'm
think
going to go up and say hi and see what they say.
Yeah, get your picture. It's kind of a nice thing to have, actually. When I went in 2019, I saw my picture from 2014 still there, which was
Oh, wow.
it was great to see. Yeah. Well, look,
Yeah.
have you thought about when you think this will be done? You're now August 16th, Wednesday, August 16th. You're thinking 3 months, another 2 or 3 months, 3 months.
Yeah, probably. I'd like to think a little less than 3 months. And
You're going to push it. Are you going to push it more then?
I'll be home for Thanksgiving. Yeah.
Right.
I need to be home for Thanksgiving. I need to go home Labor Day weekend for my mom's 90th birthday. So that'll take a couple of days out. So, but I think it'll go good. I don't know. Everybody says once you've done the top half, you fly through the bottom half, but time will tell.
Yeah.
I don't know.
But don't wish it away, Joanne. These are special times. You've got lots of miles on your legs already. You're feeling strong, I'm sure, anyway. And you've done bloody Iceland as well, and so you're kind of you're a seasoned hiker anyway. I knew you were before you started, but doing this, you still got quite a way to go. Don't wish it away, because this is lovely being out there, and it's a lovely part. I think Virginia. It's a totally underrated state. People talk about the Virginia blues. I think it's partly because it takes so long to get through. It's 500 miles, a quarter of the trail. So, enjoy it, because it's lovely ridge walking. I think it's terrific to be up there. And I think you're going to hit some lovely little towns. I think you're going to enjoy it. And I really hope you do.
That's what I'm looking forward to is I picture the second half as being a whole different adventure, because I haven't hiked in that kind of environment, and I haven't been to the Shennies, and I haven't been to the Smokies, and
sure, yeah. Of course, the Smokies, yeah. So look, now you're going to be our last one left, I presume. There's three others still out there, but just stay in touch. We're probably going to get you on the show every week, because you'll be the last one left.
Okay.
Oh, dear. All right, Joe. Well, have a good time. I know you will, and just enjoy it and say hi to everybody, and just have a blast.
I will. Thank you, Steve.
Okay. Cheers then.
Yep. Cheers.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
She's certainly resilient. What a summer she's having. I'm not sure I could combine an AT hike with a group hike, but she seems to be getting stronger and stronger. It's going to be good catching up with her as she heads south in search of that solitude. Well, apart from this big oaf interrupting her every now and then. We've got a new recurring donor, Jeffrey Breeden, this week, as well as regular monthly donors Gail Posey, Todd Withrow, Ron Ward, Sabre Thompson and Suzanne Johnson, while the lovely Mary Marks chipped in with a very generous sum. Thanks to all of you for your continued support. It is so much appreciated. Another of our Mighty Blue class who decided to flip is Jessica Lang-Wright. Jessica has had an emotional and physical battle this year, and I'm so impressed at how she's pushed on through. I saw a post she made on Facebook a few weeks ago asking for suggestions on where to flip. She ended it with, "Quitting is not an option." Here's Jessica.
Hello.
Hey, Jessica, I've had a few technical issues of my own. Can you hear me okay?
Yep, I hear you.
That's fine. Well, we've had no texts. It's late in the evening. I've had a couple of drinks. So let's see how this works out, shall we?
This will be fun.
Yes, it should be fun. So how you doing?
I'm doing great. I am back in New Hampshire.
Wow, that must feel good. That must feel good.
It does feel good. It does. It's nice to be on home turf, so to speak.
Has it given you kind of a reset by just skipping up forward?
Yeah, I think so. We took almost a week off trail, and
wow,
that just allowed my body to recover from the heat and humidity and just all of it. And then skipping up here, I spent a couple of days with some of my friends back home and
nice.
My husband, and so that was really nice. And people, familiar faces cheering you on. How could it not? And then familiar territory. So,
did you consider not going back
to the trail?
Yeah.
Yeah, I did. And
talk me through that.
It was interesting. Yeah, so just the heat and humidity and everything was just bothering me so much in Virginia. And I had my dad come down to West Virginia when we got to Harpers Ferry. had my dad come down from New York and pick me up. And seeing my parents also was a bit of a boost in some ways too.
Sure.
And as we were leaving Harpers Ferry, I had been thinking about like, this might be it. And as we were leaving Harpers Ferry, I felt like I was being torn away from my home.
Wow.
Is the only way I can describe it.
Wow.
And I was like, all right, so I guess I'm going back. Like, it was very weird feeling.
And so did your friends and your family, did they kind of recuperate you, make you feel like you wanted to go back? Or when you got home, did you actually literally think of saying, I could be done here?
I think seeing how enthusiastic, like, especially my dad, I had no idea, and I'm going to like get choked up here probably. So before I left, I gave my dad this map of the AT that is like this big, long, narrow map that like a lot of people have seen, right? I had no idea. I figured, he'd kind of follow along on the map or whatever. My dad has been annotating every place I have stopped from Georgia to West Virginia on that map with the date. When we got to my parents' house, he put an X on the map where my parents lived and like started writing the dates down there. And then on top of that, like there was a legal pad with like notes on every day of like the messages I sent them and where I was from, like I have an in reach. So, every day it's like, hi, I'm starting, and then tell him when I'm done for the day and whatnot.
Nice.
So my parents are both 100% behind me, and, my friends just, I think one of the things that happens when we're in this is like, we're in this with people that are in it too. And they have the same kind of thing about like, we're trying to get this done and we have this many miles to go and halfway isn't that much and blah, blah, blah. And then you talk to people that are not in it and they're like, you walked 1,000 miles, like they're so amazed by what's happening and how could you not be bolstered by that? So that was very good.
It's funny though, that I think people need or want, somebody said this a couple of months ago actually, people want to lay eyes on you. They just want to see you and know that the thing they're reading about is actually happening and that you're doing it and you're well that you're doing it as well. I think the fact that your father saw you must have been great for him. He must have felt terrific for it. And, he now knows you're okay. He knows you didn't die out there.
Right.
He knows you weren't too injured out there. You obviously you had that terrible time in the smokers and so on, but you're good. You've done all these miles and you got them.
Well, a friend of mine that I got to see while I was there, we kind of like surprised her because she had friends with another friend of mine and she didn't know I was going to be there, and we surprised her. And when she saw me, she started crying. She's like hugging me and she kept saying, you're okay. And I'm like, hey, yeah, I'm okay. Like, you didn't think I was okay? Like, I've been hosting, but
absolutely. People get vested in what you're doing, and you're always well. I was shocked when I went home because I got injured and I had to go home for a week, and people were. I was shocked at people's reactions to me as well. So I understand how that is. So you came back, and you came back to where did you come back on?
Yeah, so we started in Hanover, New Hampshire,
Tough.
And oddly enough, a couple of years ago, I had done about the first 30 miles of New Hampshire on like a 4-day trip. So it was familiar territory that way too. Yeah. We got dropped off in Hanover, started our way out. The mud and the bugs are unbelievable. The wet conditions up here have not necessarily changed. Like I ran into somebody who was a caretaker for the Dartmouth Outing Club at one point, and older guy, he's been around for a while. He's like, it's the worst summer I've ever seen. Like the mud and the water and the bugs are just like epic proportions. And 2 years ago when I hiked this section, that was supposedly the wettest July we had on record to that point, and it's like 12 times worse.
Wow.
Now. So it tells you just how crazy it is in this part of the world right now.
Well, I was looking this morning at a video, funny enough, of my 2014 hike. I was going through a bunch of videos, and it was my first day, I think, in New Hampshire. And I said, I feel the need to say that New Hampshire so far has been very easy, because I knew how tough it was going to be later on. So you've now you've hit the whites, I presume now.
Yeah, we have. So we got to, you love this too. So we got to Smarts Mountain on, I think it was day 2, and then the weather came in. So we actually took 2 on-trail zeros in the Smarts Mountain fire warden's cabin.
Oh my
because
God.
What better place to be in a terrible thunderstorm and whatever than a 4-sided cabin with a roof and a door. So, we hung out there. I had my first fall on the AT there.
Your first.
And I knew you would love that.
Yeah,
my very first fall.
Wow.
And the worst part of it is I was falling out of the privy.
That's fantastic. You had a privy fall. That's excellent.
Yeah. So they have this terrible ramp out of this privy, and I've been up there before, and I remember thinking to myself, like, this is not a good situation. And sure enough, I think on the second day we were up there, I ended up falling out of it.
You've been going up and down bloody mountains, and you fell on the ramp of a privy. I mean, really, come on, woman. Exactly. It's okay. It's incredible.
You can't make this stuff up,
you
right?
Can't, you really can't. So you sound so much happier. I'm so pleased about that. So tell us about the White Mountains, and I don't actually know where you are, and I know you're not too keen on putting out exactly where you are, but have you done some of the other interesting ones?
So we continued on after that. We got to Glencliff, and this was one of the reasons why I wanted to skip up here. I knew I would have support. So had a friend pick us up and brought us to the Notch Hostel, which is another seeing friends and total homecoming. And this place is amazing. And I can't say enough good things about it. Anybody who misses it, you are missing out for sure. So we came back here and then did a slack pack of Mount Moosilauke southbound.
Wow.
Because everybody talks about
I did that twice.
Down.
Yeah, totally right.
Yep. And I worked here at the Notch last summer for a few weeks. It was one of the things that helped me decide if I wanted to do a through hike. And I was picking people up on the shuttles that had just walked down that, and the look of shell shock on their faces told me everything I needed to know.
So tell us about your experience.
We slack packed that south.
Tell us about it.
Yeah. So definitely glad we made the choice to go Sobo on that one. I mean, and this year again, especially with all of the water, the waterfalls were just incredibly beautiful and incredibly roaring, gushing water. So you're going up these very steep rocks, and they've got, the wood stairs into the side of the hill and stuff. And, there were a couple of definitely sketchy spots, and you're getting close to the water and whatnot, but we did pretty well with it. Made the climb pretty well, got up there, got to the shelter, took a little break, and then did the rest of it. And it was about somewhere in the neighborhood of 50-mile-an-hour winds when we got to the exposed summit up there, which was kind of awesome. I mean, the first time, so I've been working on the 4,000 footers for a couple of years now. And the first time I went up there, it was absolutely calm and there was no wind, and that's highly unusual. So I feel like I got the full experience this time. Yeah,
you certainly did.
And it's one of those things where you pick up your foot and you're expecting it to go down in a certain place, and it gets blown 3 feet over. And so you're trying to stay on the trail and everything. The ceiling was pretty low that day, but it kept lifting and showing us the view and then coming back down. And it was amazing. Definitely had to bundle up once we got up there, and then ended up making our way down and the rest of the climb down. It's a pretty steep climb down for the first mile or two.
Yes,
and then it was pretty easy.
Yeah.
So then we got picked up again.
After that, it's okay, isn't it? Once you get past the first mile or so, it's great down there, and I love that. It's one of the things going up Moosilauke. Please send me a picture, by the way, because I put Mary Marks' picture up last week. I put in Mark Carpenter's this week. If you send me yours, I'll send yours on Moosilauke as well. So send me that if you can. Okay.
Sure.
And do you feel, as I do anyway, I know you know that area, but don't you feel now you've stepped up a level?
Oh, totally. It's a whole nother ball game here, for sure.
Yeah.
The following day after Moosilauke, we decided to do the Notch offers the 17 miles black pack of the Kinsman. And we did that northbound.
Wow.
And once again, the adventures continue, because we started at 7:30 in the morning and we didn't finish until after midnight. It was a long, long day.
Oh, dear.
And there was part of me that was really like, boy, I severely overestimated our ability to get this done. We ended up, we got up. This is another spot that I don't know why more people don't talk about, but the south side of South Kinsman, that climb up.
It's horrendous.
It's worse than Moosilauke. It's worse than Moosilauke. Like, I don't understand why people don't talk about that. That was sketchy as heck. And at that point, there's like a bog that we had to walk through. And of course, like the boards are underwater. There's no place to go. So it's soaking wet feet for hours, whatever. It is what it is at this point. But that climb was crazy. So we get over South Peak. We get over the North Peak. We're working our way down the Fish and Jimmy Trail. And it starts to get dark, of course. And, we're prepared. We have our headlamps and all that. But, like, that climb down is no joke either.
Sketchy
by the time we got to Lonesome Lake, it was completely dark. We basically just filled water bottles, got a quick snack, kept going. And then the weather started to roll in. So now, as we're getting to Cascade Brook, because there's 2 water crossings before the end of this deal, as we get to Cascade Brook, thunderstorm starts raining, and because everything is saturated here, we watch the water level rise as we're trying to cross this thing.
Oh, gosh.
That was scary.
Yeah, I bet it was.
Mike has swiftwater rescue tech training. I've never been so happy to be hiking with somebody who has this expertise, because if I had been by myself, I would have had to turn around and go back to the hut. There was no way I was crossing that thing by myself.
You know what, Jessica, I listen to you now, and I know how you've had some tough weeks. So you've had a tough hike, in fact, to be fair. In a lot of ways, it's been really tough on you emotionally and physically as well. But you know what? You're one of the few of our class that's still going. I mean, you're amazing. You're still going, and I hope your father listens to some of these podcasts. Does he ever listen to any of them?
He doesn't really do technology, so at some point I might sit him down and figure out how to let him do that. Yeah. Well,
he'll be pleased how well you're doing. It's amazing. You're still going, and that's the thing you have to do. Is just keep going. And I can listen to you. You and I have spoken a few times on and off recording, and you've shared some tough times with me, and yet now you sound happier than I've heard you for quite a long time. So I'm really pleased for you. And I'm glad that it's still working out for you. And, man, you are still going. So it's great.
Thank you. It's good to be home.
I'm sure it is. And you got all the adventures still to come as well. So, look, lovely to hear from you again. I'm glad we could do this in the evening. And just keep trucking, okay?
Will do.
Cheers, then. Say hi to Mike for me. Cheers.
Will do.
Bye.
Yep. Bye-bye.
She took 2 zeros in the warden's hut on Smart Mountain to wait out the weather. But you know what? She's managing a hike. We've talked before about how you have to do that. Plans just go out the window. You've got to adapt on the fly, and all sorts of issues notwithstanding, Jessica is managing her hike. Finally today, George Stefanos is coming to the end of his AT hike exactly 40 years ago. Now he's quitting the slate packing and getting back to nights in the woods. I'll see you next week. Saturday the 10th of September 1983, mile 1833.2. I started out this morning at 8:40, hoping to cover the entire 20 miles of the Appalachian Trail through the Carter, Moriah, Wildcat Range in one day, in order to make up for some lost time in the White Mountains. I'll save you the trouble of working out the mileage at the beginning of this entry. I didn't make it. I didn't even come close. The AT was on the Lost Pond Trail for the first mile today, following the course of the Ellis River through Pinkham Notch and brushing the shore of a pretty lake. Then the fun began. The AT turned left onto Wildcat Ridge Trail and began an ascent which made the Webster Cliffs look like a picnic. It climbed straight up one cliff after another. On the plus side, I enjoyed some terrific views of the notch from those cliffs, despite the overcast and the fog. The rains had come late last night, and the threat of more still lingered this morning. I began my hike walking in a drizzle and wearing my rain jacket, but that initial climb convinced me I could do without the jacket. My sweat was soaking me much more thoroughly than the light rain would. When it finished with the cliffs, the Appalachian Trail traversed about a zillion steep little knobs known as the Wild Kittens. That's a really cute name, but I came up with several I thought much more appropriate as I struggled over the little Eventually, I reached the 4,000-foot first summit of Wildcat, imaginatively named Peak E, and descended slightly into a col where the upper terminal of a gondola ride was located. At a snack bar inside, I quickly chugged down 2 Cokes before heading out to tackle the rest of the ridge. The climb up to Peak D from there was nothing, but so were the views today from its wooden observation platform. Clouds and fog had smothered the ridge. The fellow at the snack bar had told me that all of this was supposed to burn off as the day went along, but that was not yet happening. The descent and ascent on either side of Wildcat Col were both steep, rocky and hazardous. Most of the way I was compelled to clutch onto trees, rocks and anything else within reach in order to avert a plunge. The trail over today's entire section was by far the most dangerous in the White Mountains, and that is saying a lot. It was of no help to me that the rain had made the passage over the frequent, sharply tilted, smooth rock faces even trickier today. It felt like ice climbing without the gear. I averaged about 1.3 miles per hour along the trail today. That brings me to another problem I had with the trail through much of the White Mountains. Having been out hiking now for more than 4 months, I know my walking paces very well. The guidebook mileages here are not consistent with the rest of the Appalachian Trail. Some of the major discrepancies I've encountered are unbelievable. I kept falling farther and farther behind the pace I needed to maintain as the day wore on. There were 5 main peaks of Wildcat, but there must have been dozens of little knobs along the crest that didn't qualify as peaks, and the AT climbed them all. Hazardous sections abounded. The day was windy, damp and chilly. Yeah, I was sweating like a pig. The descent into Carter Notch was a bear and considerably longer than the 0.6 of a mile given in the guidebook. I forced myself to move along that ridge at what was at least a 2 mile per hour pace, yet it still took me more than a half hour. Give me a break. I finally got down below the clouds in Carter Notch and even caught a glimpse of the sun. I took a long, relaxing break on the shore of one of the lovely Carter Lakes, a rather large tarn encircled by high cliffs. Having finally conceded to myself that I was not going to make it to the US 12 by midnight at this pace, a change of plans was required. It was almost 1 o'clock and I had covered only 5.5 of the 20 guidebook miles in this section. I decided to take the North Carter and the Imp trails down into Pinkham Notch. It was another 5.5 miles along the AT to the junction with the North Carter Trail and 4.5 miles down to the road on those 2 side trails. That would add another long climb to tomorrow's hike in order to pick up the AT where I left off, but it was my only real choice. The climb up Carter Dome from the Notch was worse than the climb down into the Notch had been. It was straight up for a half mile. I swore and I sweated and made my way up over the rocks. Finally, the trail mellowed a bit to the point where it was merely steep, and I made it to the top. I'd climbed back up into the clouds, so there were no views from the Alpine summit. It was still a wonderful spot, and I was able to relax and enjoy it now that I'd given up on the 20-mile day. The Appalachian Trail descended slightly and then climbed a northern summit of the dome, known as Mount Height. It was an excellent viewpoint, but not today. The entire ridge was very scenic, even if the trail traversing it was nuts. The trail down into Cedar Pass was no exception. Lots of steep rocks to crawl down. Cedar Pass was nice. A beautiful spruce and fir forest covered a col so deep it was practically a notch. On the downside, that depth meant another big climb coming out the other side, which is what I got on the ascent of South Carter Mountain. Fortunately, the climb was merely steep, and I was able to walk it rather than crawl up rock faces. The remainder of the trail today was like this stretch, giving my knees a much-needed break from the insanity of the Pinkham Notch to Cedar Pass section. There were many open areas along the crest on both South Carter and Middle Carter Mountain. The nicest was on Mount Leith, a knob north of Middle Carter. It was very scenic, even though the clouds still were wiping out all distant prospects. It was past 4 o'clock when I arrived at the trailhead of the North Carter Trail, in the col between Middle Carter and North Carter Mountain. The AT crossing of US 2 was 9 miles away, and I had needed 7 hours for the first 11 miles. I was not up for my 5th night hike in 7 days, so I turned off the Appalachian Trail and began to descend into Pinkham Notch. This route involved a 3,000-foot descent along the North Carter and Imp trails. Both were much better trails than the adjacent portion of the AT. I was down at the road by 6 o'clock. I walked about 2 miles south on New Hampshire 16 to the base terminal of the Mount Washington Auto Road, where a payphone was in the parking lot. I called my mother at the motel to tell her about the change of plans, and she drove over to pick me up. This was one of the toughest days of my hike, and it was all just to cover 11 book miles of the Appalachian Trail. Tomorrow, I will have to make up for that 3,000-foot descent before I even start the AT. This is screwing up my plans. On the bright side, I passed the 6/7 point of the Appalachian Trail today, and Maine is close. Of course, I still must finish the final 9 miles of this ridge and the first 17 miles of the reputedly even tougher Moosilauke range before I see that fabled country. Sunday the 11th of September 1983. Mile 1842.3. I started up the Imp Trail at 10 o'clock this morning, telling my mother to meet me at the US 2 crossing at 7 o'clock. That gave me 9 hours to hike 4.5 miles of feeder trail and 9 miles of the Appalachian Trail. I would need to average 1.5 miles per hour. On this trail, I was not sure I could pull this off. I made my best time of the day on the Imp and North Garter trails despite the long climb, making it up in 2.5 hours, which put me almost a half hour ahead of my required pace. Within 1.5 hours on the AT, I had lost the entire half-hour cushion on a steep, rocky climb up North Garter Mountain, and an even worse climb down the other side. No views today either. Yesterday's clouds were still around. In fact, they looked even more ominous. After traversing a bunch of steep little knobs, I arrived at the side trail to Imp's shelter. Having run out of water, I headed over to the shelter. Just as I was arriving, a heavy downpour struck. I made a dash for the shelter and made it while still fairly dry. The rain was brief, and I was able to wait it out. I filled my water bottle and was back on the trail a few minutes after 2 o'clock, with almost 8 more miles to go. A long climb up Mount Moriah passed over several open ledges. Someday I would like to hike this entire section in nice weather. Today, the clouds had lifted slightly, revealing some hazy views along the ridge crest. The trail was steep but reasonable, and I was able to remain ahead of schedule. Shortly after Mount Moriah, the AT turned off the Carpenter trail and left the open ledges behind. A mile or so later, the AT turned onto Rattle River Trail and dropped precipitously off the side of the ridge. After another mile, the descent mellowed, and I had almost easy hiking down to US 2. I flew along for the first time in 2 days, following Rattle River down off the mountain, and arrived at Route 2 at 6 o'clock, an hour early. Remembering a nearby motel with a payphone in front where I could call my mother to tell her I was early, I started walking the highway towards Gorham. The first quarter mile on that road was an Appalachian Trail roadwalk, which I would have to cover anyway. After more than a half hour of walking, I decided that the phone was not as close as I had thought, so I sat down to wait for my ride. When my mother arrived, the phone turned out to be only about 2 more minutes' walk further down the road. Expletive deleted. Today, I passed another big milestone. Less than 300 miles of the AT remain. Tomorrow, I resume backpacking. Slack packing was great, but I will enjoy sleeping in the woods again and escaping the tyranny of the day hiking schedule, where I must make it to a certain point each day by a certain time. Time to carry my life with me on my back once again. 296.2 miles to go.